Welcome back to the Wealth Effect. Today we're talking about something that impacts that very small device in your pocket. For centuries, this concept of ownership was that if you bought a car or a phone, you owned it, all of it. The gears, the silicon, the memory, you maintained it till you absolutely destroyed it, or you modified it or repaired it any way you wanted. However, in the modern world, we're witnessing the solidification of parts pairing, a technical and cryptographic lockdown where manufacturers like Apple and some car manufacturers as well have successfully moved the concept of ownership from the physical to the digital. This isn't just about proprietary screws or specialized tools anymore. It's about the implementation of software locks that impact specific components on the device itself, creating a cryptographic handshake that must be verified in the cloud before the repair is even deemed valid. Even if you take a genuine first-party screen from a functional iPhone and swap it into another one that has the identical model, the software may intentionally disable critical features like Face ID or True Tone simply because the serial numbers do not match according to their server. This is the ultimate digital enclosure, a system where manufacturers control their ability to maintain your own device. When a manufacturer uses parts pairing, they're effectively controlling the entire life cycle of the product, ensuring that the only way to restore full functionality is through their authorized service channels, which often charge significantly more than independent shops or even if you were to do it yourself. This creates an artificial floor for repair costs and a steepening depreciation curve for the asset itself. Because the device cannot easily be repaired by a third party, it creates a low residual value in the used market. It prevents the refurbishment economy from scaling because the cost of clearing those cryptographic handshakes often exceed the margin of resale itself. We're seeing a world where total cost of ownership must now include the risk of digital bricking, where a simple component failure that should cost $50 to fix up ends up costing $500 because it's locked under these cryptographic handshakes behind a proprietary paywall. This tension is more visible in the agricultural sector, where John Deere has basically become the evil villain when it comes to right to repair movements. In modern America, a farmer's ability to plant or harvest is no longer dependent on whether the soil is good or is rained, but on the willingness of the software's platform to recognize a replace sensor or a new hydraulic pump. When a tractor breaks down in the middle of a harvest, they must now wait anxiously for a certified technician with proprietary tools and a laptop just to confirm the handshake for the new part. This centralized control over the tools of production is a departure from the independent, self-reliance nature of the agricultural industry in the US, and it introduces an additional failure point into our food supply chain. The legal landscape is starting to shift. However, we see a global wave of fair repair legislation that seeks to outlaw these digital fences, requiring manufacturers to provide same diagnostic tools and handshake keys to independent shop owners that they provide to their own technicians. From Oregon to the European Union, regulators are beginning to recognize that parts pairing is a form of anti-competitive tying that harms the environment and accelerating e-waste as well as closing small business owners. For the investor, this creates a fascinating regulatory arbitrage opportunity. Companies that lean into repairability, like Framework Laptops, are positioning themselves as ethical tech. And we're seeing a very interesting metric that has been around for years, but people are starting to pay a little more attention to them as phone ownership tends to span a couple years now, and that is repairability, where the long-term value of a fleeting device is calculated based on how easily it can be repaired without manufacturer intervention. In a world of increasing resource scarcity and price gouging, the ability to keep our own tools still functioning and running isn't just like a hobbyist anymore. It's necessary for the macro economy. Ultimately, the fight for right to repair is a fight that defines value. If we allow the parts pairing lockdown to become the default standard for everything from our cars to our kitchen appliances, we're effectively transitioning from owners to leasers. And there is nothing more diminishing than being told you cannot fix your own tools. And this creates the slow death of the tinker economy. The economic function here is the direct result of an information monopoly, where manufacturers have successfully reclassified basic service manuals and diagnostic schematics as trade secrets or intellectual property that are far too dangerous for the average citizen to possess. This is a shift from the total cost of ownership because it increases the inability to access a $5 plastic clip or a specific proprietary screw that turns $1,000 appliance into basically a paperweight just sitting there, all because of a single part that fails. And the modern economy is shifting to a throwaway economy because of it, proprietizing short-term sales targets over long-term asset durability. In a world where we are increasingly concerned about resources and the environment, the most economically sound thing we can do is keeping our existing products operational for as long as possible. Yet the current corporate incentive structure is built on planned obsolescence, where the cost of a Genius Bar repair is intentionally priced 60 to 70% of the cost of a brand new unit, effectively nudging the customer into a replacement cycle. And it's pretty wild to think that these manual lockdowns are justified under the idea that customer safety is their top priority, which is basically a pathetic argument suggesting that people who own these smartphones and operate these machineries that aren't competent enough to simply replace their own battery or just inspect their own equipment. This regulatory gatekeeping is often supported by lobbyist efforts that seek to maintain a monopoly on service revenue, which has become a critical high-margin segment for tech companies as their hardware sales begin to plateau. And we should be supporting legislation that maintain open sourcing for service manuals of any product sold in the public market after a certain period. This would decentralize the knowledge base, allowing a new generation of small business owners to basically make repairability affordable for the locals and sustainable to keep our neighborhoods both economically vibrant and our landscape empty of all these harmful e-waste products. Ultimately, the workbench in the garage isn't just a place to fix things. It was a classroom for problem solving, a laboratory for inventions, and a symbol of real ownership. And when we lose the ability to tinker, we lose the ability to innovate, to mod. And as many as the greatest startups in history have began in the garage just from tinkering with existing products, I don't think we should end it now. And as we mentioned before, with planned obsolescence, which is when hardware is designed to start to break down, not because it's actually failing, but because the company has planned it this way. To understand the sheer absurdity of this model, we have to look back at the $5 friction. If a simple component like a charging port has a replacement cost less than $5 to manufacture, but fails due to standard wear and tear, you should have the ability to swap it either at home if you have the confidence or at a store for a reasonable price. However, because the port is now commonly soldered onto the logic board, a single bent pin or loose connection could render the entire $1,000 plus phone functionally useless in the eyes of the corporate service center. Instead of being a $5 repair, the official solution that is offered to these customers is either a total motherboard replacement that can range anywhere between $600 or more, or that nudge towards a trade-in to buy a brand new model. This increases the scale of the e-waste crisis, which is difficult to wrap your head around until you look at the raw data coming from the latest global e-waste monitor, which shows that we are producing e-waste 5 times faster than we are recycling it. We're currently on track to hit 82 million tons of annual e-waste by 2030, a staggering 33% increase from just a few years ago. And less than a quarter of this massive pile is actually properly collected. When a $1,000 laptop is tossed into a landfill because its port is bent, it isn't just trash, it's just thrown out there with its toxic chemicals. While e-waste only accounts for 3% of the total volume in our landfills, it is responsible for roughly 70% of the toxic metals found in sites including lead, mercury, and cadmium, which can leach into groundwater. Furthermore, the environmental impact of replace don't repair cycles begin long before the device even reaches its landfill, as 70 to 85% of the laptop's total carbon emissions are locked in during the manufacturing process itself. Every time we are forced to replace a machine that could have easily been repaired, we are triggering a massive chain reaction of resource extraction just to put a new device in your hand and throw away the other. And this is creating real pushback from the EU's digital product passport, which will soon require manufacturers to break down a product's repairability and end of life roadmap. And as this comes about, we're also starting to see the creep of software as a service, which is a strategic business pivot where manufacturers are no longer just selling you the machine, but instead they're granting you a revocable license to use the product. In the eyes of many legal departments, you don't actually own your own car, your tractor, or your device, or even your fridge. You merely are a tenant in a digital format. If you choose to use an unauthorized part or attempt to repair it that hasn't been sanctioned by the company, the manufacturer now can technically and remotely brick your asset, effectively taking your own property from you. To understand these mechanisms, we have to look at the digital rights management. In the past, if you bought a piece of equipment, you had first sale rights to modify it, resell it, or run it to the ground at your own terms. Today, however, companies are using end user license agreements to argue that while you may own the steel, rubber, and components, the software required to move it and run it is only licensed to you. This creates tethered property, a dynamic where the utility of your asset is entirely dependent on the continuous relationship with the vendor. As some of the recent 2026 federal filings, the FTC is currently locked in battles with manufacturers like John Deere over this exact issue, alleging that software locks are being used to monopolize the aftermarket economy and drive super competitive profits. When a farmer in the middle of a harvest is locked out of their machines because the part had an authentication error, the financial friction isn't just an inconvenience, it's a direct threat to their livelihood. And this creates a really big problem that we should all think about as we end the show. If a company goes bankrupt, as we've seen before, or decides to shut down the product line, basically flip on the kill switch, should they be legally required to remove it, but provide the open source code to ensure that these physical assets remain functional in the hands of people who paid for it? Because we can't allow our private property that we paid for to be treated as a limited time thing that can be revoked by the company at any time they wish for. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something. Until next time.